Because the shul has been around for 50 years.
From young Israel at West Hempstead's wagon.
Initially, there was a big question as to whether our shul would become a Young Israel or whether it would become part of the Orthodox Union. They were making a strong drive for shuls. We had representatives come down to tell us the benefits of joining either the OU and the Young Israel, and finally it was decided after meeting with the different representatives that we would join the Young Israel movement. And so we changed our name formally from the West Hempstead Synagogue to the Young Israel of West Hempstead.
One, I remember my first drosha when I was confused between Hempstead and Dogwood, or Dagwood and Bumstead. Was that it?
I have the fondest memories of the year in West Hempstead. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most meaningful year of my life. It was an incredible year. West Hempstead was and remains, for me, the quintessential Jewish community.
I have a tremendous amount of admiration for our founding families that we're honoring this evening. I think they really laid the foundation and set the groundwork for the growth of this community and allowed it and worked on developing it into the true community that we are today.
As the new principal of Hank, I felt the absolute need for an Orthodox shul. There wasn't a shul within a radius of 10 miles of the yeshiva. And practically the first or second day that I was there, I resolved that we would have a shul and that it would be housed in the yeshiva.
There were a couple of gentlemen who were anxious that there be an Orthodox minyan. One of them was Emmerich Jacobi, alav shalom, and Mr. Finkelstein.
My father was a dreamer, and he wanted to move his family to suburbia, and he knew some other people who lived in West Hempstead. They were not Shomer Shabbos people, but they were very nice friends, and he liked the community, and there were a few families who were interested in forming a shul, and he felt there was a nucleus, and he was a pioneer. He was a builder of many communities, and we moved to West Hempstead.
My father insisted that I go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and tell the story and see what he would say. And I did. Cy and I went there. We told him our hopes and dreams, and he said, go for it. He said absolutely he encouraged us to go and pioneer and build an Orthodox shul in West Hempstead.
In fact, most of us that moved in here were veterans, and they were building a lot of homes, and we were all getting married, and we were looking for apartments, and there were none available in the city or in Brooklyn or any place. So they were building homes, a GI mortgage for veterans especially, no down payment, 4%, so practically everybody was able to afford to buy a house, so we came out to the island.
By Rosh Hashanah of 1955, we had a minyan, and we davened in the old American Legion Hall, which is exactly where baby Hank is now.
I remember a Rosh Hashanah there. I remember hearing shofar blowing there. It's actually my first recollection of shofar blowing.
The first Yom Kippur, we arranged to have the services at the what was then the American Legion Hall, which is now the Children's Center of the Hebrew Academy on Hempstead Avenue. We had, as usual, difficulty in getting a minyan. We had to bring 2 people in from New York City to form the minyan. I was given the dubious honor of being the gabbai, having had no experience. We arranged initially that Harold Shustak, in view of his donating the Torah, would receive the honor of Mafta Yonah. Came a time for the Mincha and Mafta Yonah. I dutifully, as a gabbai, called the Kohen and the Levi, and came Shlishi. Not knowing what I was doing, I called someone for Shlishi. At that particular moment, Harold Shustak jumped up in the air about 2 feet, his face livid as a tomato, and ran up to the front, picked up his Torah, stalked out, and never we saw him that day again. That was our experience of Yom Kippur, for our first Yom Kippur in the shul.
In time for Sukkot, my parents had our sukkah built. We had a permanent sukkah, where we just put new schach on every year, and it was a large enough sukkah for the whole shul to come for Kiddush. And beginning with that Kiddush in 1956, my parents had Kiddush on Sukkot every year for the whole shul.
Officially, there was a hiatus between that minyan and the time that we officially had a meeting where we we gave birth to a brand new Orthodox shul, and we arranged to make sure that we would meet every Shabbos, rain or shine or snow, through the entire period at the Hank building, which became the old Hank building, which was a broken down farmhouse.
An old
And
Victorian
from
white
that
mansion.
from that point on, it was every Shabbos we got together without a minyan, with daven by Yechias. Now this happened in late November, when we officially established an Orthodox shul to be called the West Hempstead Synagogue. And from that point on, located at 609 Hempstead Avenue, we had a shul. We had no minyan, but we had a shul. And we very religiously, got together every Shabbos. But once in a while we did have a minyan. Somebody floated in, a guest, or somebody came for the weekend. But most of the time, the entire winter, we spent davening by ourselves. We had a Sefer Torah. We had borrowed Chemushim and Sidorim from the Hank students, but we didn't have a minyan.
I was a very little girl, and I remember at the very beginning there was no minyan. There were a few men, and Rabbi Findel was a newlywed and principal of Hank, and there was a meeting, and there were a few people, and they decided to form a shul. And I know even at the very beginning they had to import yeshiva boys, I don't know from which yeshivas, to come every week for Shabbos, 1 or 2 guys, however many they needed to make a minyan. And they stayed at our house, and I guess other homes as well.
This congregation was established because of children. Because every family, aside from us original pioneers that I know of moved here because of the yeshiva, to give the kids a Jewish education.
Obviously, as a shul, had to have a president, and so the first order of business was to have a meeting and to elect a set of officers. As you probably saw in the minutes, I was not the first choice. I was not even the second choice. I don't think I was the third choice. But we were running down the list, and eventually someone had to be president, and I finally accepted the job, not knowing what it really entails to be a president of a shul, especially a shul that was just being in the process of forming.
Shows you how confident we were about the success of this enterprise. Nobody wanted to be president.
We moved in on a Tuesday, March 1st, 1956. The next day we got a phone call from some member of the Young Israel of West Hempstead. It was called the West Hempstead Synagogue at that time. And they said that please make sure that Morris Kaufman comes to shul on Shabbat because he would be the 10th man, and they were naming a new baby. So we made it our business to go to shul, and the person who was named was Debbie Sigmund. And we met the Sigmunds for the first time, and we've remained extremely good friends with both Henry and Selma until this very day.
I was the second president of the shul. I followed Murray Simpson, and Seymour Schmerler followed me. It was interesting and fun because of the differences among the members and the people who joined the community. There were no two alike. And they were all attracted to the same things that I was attracted to, or my wife Esther. It made it a fascinating place to be.
I remember vividly on the first yontif that we spent at the Hebrew Academy. We needed a machitze. Cy Stem came to my store in Garden City with a pound of grapes and a bottle of wine. Material, one side plastic and denim, and we created a machitze.
I came to West Hempstead in February 1957 as a young bride. And I came to a very warm little group of people. And one thing that I remember would seem pretty funny now, because as being married to the rabbi, I was the only one who had a head covering at that time. And I remember very specifically at Natalie Schachter, Aleh Shalom's birthday party, I think it was her 30th, I came to Ethel Simpson's house in Garden City, and all the women wanted to really make me feel very welcome. So they all came in these gigantic, funny hats, so I wouldn't be the only one.
Shul in itself was a very small place in the yeshiva, one room, where we all fitted in. We had a minyan when I came of about 10, 11 people, maybe 12 people.
I was here about a year. I arrived here in March of '65. About a year later, I came into the shul, and it looked like vandalism, and I called up Rabbi Kanatopsky. He says, "What's the matter?" I said, "There's leaves and there's palms, and it's like somebody vandalized the building." He said, "Tom, it's a holiday called Hoshana Rabbah." So I caught on quick.
At the time this minyan was evolving, a very important personality moved into West Hempstead. That was Dan Schachter and his wife Natalie. Dan Schachter was the son-in-law of Rabbi Joseph Luckstein, and he was among the many people, Jews, who wanted to move out to the island to have a house and have a garden, and he wanted to be part of this pioneering spirit in Nassau County to build a new Jewish Nassau County, Jewish West Hempstead.
Shabbos morning, we davened at Hank, And everybody came to shul with their little ones, even the 1 and 2 year olds. But we never permitted a Shabbos to pass without our having a Kiddush.
One of the weekly customs after the Young Israel was formed, when Dan Schachter was the president of the synagogue, was to bring all the members who participated in the Shabbos Minyan to his house after services, and he would serve them Kiddush. This was every week. There was singing, there was drinking. The food was crackers and tuna fish or something like that.
Everybody went to shul, and every Shabbos we used to have a Kiddush. And it was very like a family.
The room that was being used by the Young Israel was becoming too small because it was growing from 40 to 50 to 60 families already in the community.
Dan was one of the people who said we must have a building and it has to be in the heart of town and not too far from the yeshiva.
Finally, we found this property and we bought it. It was, Dan Schachter was very active in this, and his brother Ralph Schachter, was the architect.
Dan Schachter said, I'm going to build a shul even if I have to eat bread with oranges on top for the rest of my stay here.
I asked Rabbi Kellum one day, I said, you know, I never met a Jew named Tom. He said, oh, that's you, Rabbeinu Tom. So it stuck. I got a few other nicknames, but I can't tell you on the camera here.
From young to old, the entire community came out for the September 1963 building kickoff. Leaders like Joe Osofsky and Cy Stemp broke ground, while Moshe Dershowitz presented an award to Lou Goldberg. There were speeches, divrei Torah, cantorial selections, and shofar blowing by Harold Mechanic.
Some of the things that I recall West Hempstead most exciting was the day the trucks brought the huge A-frames that put up the new building, and all the people who were home and not at business came down to watch.
It was an A-frame, and then it was sort of flattened out so it wouldn't look like a church. So it was flattened out. It looked like an upside-down ark, like a Noah's Ark.
While the building was in the midst of construction, which Dan inspected each and every day to see what was going on and what could be done, some youngsters came into the building site and broke some of the windows in the building. Dan saw it, he ran after to try to catch the kids. It precipitated a heart attack, and he didn't live until the morning.
The feeling that first Shabbos, when everybody walked into the building across the street when it was done, was just one of being blown away. There was a feeling of awe. Well, look at this and look at what we've created. And it was probably the single event in the 50-year history of the shul that transformed the community into, you know, a big league, big time community.
The Young Israel of West Hempstead grew as much as it has for several reasons. Reason number one was because there was a yeshiva day school in the community, and people wanted their children to be able to walk to school and not ride on buses. The second reason that it grew is because there was a very good spirit here among the people who lived here, a camaraderie of sorts that the people enjoyed, a friendliness, friendly West Hempstead.
The first 10 years we struggled, but after that it was magnificent. The growth was magnificent. We never believed that West Hempstead was going to grow up to be such a big Jewish community.
Well, at that point in time, they were still counting the number of families. I think we were family 110. That's right. By the time that we left, there must have been about 250 or 260 families in West Hempstead.
The old building of Young Israel was, it should have been condemned, but people kept coming every Friday night. It was kind of scary. But they were saving the money for the new building.
Rabbi Fendel and the founding pioneers put West Hempstead on the map. Rabbi Shalom Gold created a new map, the Erev map. Within a few years, the shul built for 70 families was bursting at the seams. It was time to expand again, and ground was broken for a new shul building in June 1983. Artwork in the synagogue was inspired and created by founding families. With a new building on the horizon, Sisterhood turned to Shirley Goldberg to create a unique, handcrafted parochas. She recruited 23 women to help her.
I will never forget it. It was done with such love and such dedication, and it was really one of the highlights of our life. We would meet once a week in my house in the basement, and we decided that in order to avoid talking Lashon Hara, we would recruit women from the Young Israel who would come and lecture to us on subjects of interest to the women. And we got volunteers for that, and it turned out to be wonderful. And then we had a wonderful dedication, and it was just one of the highlights of my stay in West Hempstead.
Ever since I can remember, I was fascinated by stained glass windows. I happened to be on the building committee when this shul was being built. I felt we needed a light touch, and I couldn't think of anything more appropriate than stained glass windows. I volunteered to raise the money for the windows, which I did thanks to Norbert Schimmel and the New Hermes engravograph. I knew Paul Wood because he was an art teacher of mine, so he was commissioned to design our windows. We decided on the theme, persecution, suffering, and ultimate triumph in Jerusalem under our own flag.
The new building was dedicated in November 1986. As Myron Sokal put it,
tonight, we celebrate ourselves. This evening represents the culmination of our efforts, our labors, our peers' hopes and commitments. Tonight, we can take a deep breath and congratulate ourselves on a job well done.
growth of the community has been exponential. We were one of, I believe, of about 50 couples that moved in the summer of 1988. We're now up to approximately 670 families. And people keep moving in, which is phenomenal. We have very few people move out, which I think tells you something about the community. And many of those that are moving out, it's because they're making Aliyah.
Unbelievable, the growth. That had a lot to do with the type of rabbis we had, I guess, and the people themselves that moved in here. They were friendly and nice to each other.
Even though I don't live in West Hempstead, I keep up with what's going on there, and I have a lot of nachas with the growth of the community.
I don't think my father in his wildest dreams could have imagined what would become of the community.
And I have to thank the Young Israel Mishpacha, our Young Israel Mishpacha, for making this one of the best 50 years of our lives. It was wonderful. And now my grandchildren are members of the West Hempstead community.
The image that comes to my mind, and perhaps it's the show business lawyer in me, is the final scene of the musical Fiddler on the Roof, where the Jews of Anatevka are being forced to leave their homes, and they say a fond goodbye. And one of the characters says, you know, people pass through Anatevka and don't even know they've been there. Well, you know, and for many, many years, you could ride on the southern state and there would be no indication that West Hempstead existed. And you can get off at exit 17 and within 5 minutes can be in Hempstead or Garden City and not even know that you've passed through West Hempstead. But beneath the surface, there's a rich fabric, an ornate, magnificent tapestry of authentic Jewish life and Torah true values that has been woven over the past 50 years in this community, which is truly remarkable and of which we can all be exceedingly proud. I know that I'm proud of everyone in this community. And on a personal note, this evening resonates with me particularly because I had the schutz during my presidency to have launched and inaugurated our Jubilee celebration and to have appointed the committee which did such a fantastic job all year in celebrating our Jubilee. And I wish all of you Mazel Tov, and I look forward to attending the centennial.
My mom and dad loved the shul, the community, and their special friends.
and they gave their kids a fantastic place to grow up and an abiding love for Judaism.
From young Israel of West Hempstead's wagon. For the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County's wagon. For Eretz Yisroel's wagon. For everybody's wagon.
Michael Levine grew up in West Hempstead and returned to raise his family here. Like his parents, he has taken on numerous leadership roles, including the Parent-Child Learning Program.
When I was young, it was really a much smaller community. I remember it more in terms of about 200 people. I remember it with the center pit area, and pretty much anybody who was in there, you knew to be a new person, and you'd come over and say good Shabbos to them. We still say good Shabbos to everyone now, of course, but back then you'd say, and you knew they were a new person. Now you go up to someone and say good Shabbos, you're new here, and they say, no, I've been living here for 5 years already.
Michael is a great choice for the Jubilee Committee to choose as one of this year's honorees. He spans all the generations in the shul. He grew up here. He came back after he got married. He's set up multiple shiurim in the shul, is very, very involved. He was the third gabbai for a few years. He's friendly to everybody that he meets. I'm his chavrusa, and he is just a very special guy that I'm sure will give years of service to the shul.
When I moved into the neighborhood the first time with my parents, Michael came over to me the first Shabbos and told me that people our age get together every Shabbos afternoon, and he made sure I came and joined him and got to know everybody else. And that's just the way Michael is. Whenever someone moves into the neighborhood now, Michael is one of the first people to meet them and introduce himself. Michael and I used to have this ongoing contest. Whenever someone would move in and we'd see an unfamiliar face downstairs at the 9 o'clock minyan, we'd have this sort of competition over who could name that new face. And invariably, Michael would always win because he'd always be the first one to meet someone when they move in.
One of the most special things about living in West Hempstead is that I'm fortunate to live in a community where my parents live, and any involvement I've ever had has been based upon having seen that example set by my parents. You know, you just try as best you can a little bit to keep up with them and follow in their example. My father's a former shul president and was involved and did many things for many years before that. My mother was involved in Shoshana chapter of Amit. She was involved in the Girl Scouts. She was involved in Hank. I mean, my parents have just always been really out in the forefront, involved in doing things. And my wife, thankfully, has taken on that role also and has been incredibly involved. And anything I have time to do is only because of the example my parents set and the time that my wife gives to me. And I just wanted to thank them for that.
When Lillian Hyman came to Tanwood Drive in a 1955 Oldsmobile, the suburban building boom was in full swing. It wasn't long before she moved into her new home and joined the sisterhood. She's been active ever since.
We all became active right away. When we had sisterhood meetings, you had to go because somebody would not ask you, what are you doing Wednesday night? I'm picking you up Wednesday night. In order to get enough people to come, you felt you had to go. Natalie was very active, Naomi was very active, I think Shirley Goldberg was too, I don't remember. And the few people who lived here, that's how we became active in the community.
Hi everybody, and just wanted to wish Lillian Hyman a mazel tov on this wonderful award, this Eishes Chayil Award. And we are so proud and honored to have her here as part of our community, and especially on this auspicious occasion of our 50th anniversary. It is so a well-deserved honor.
I remember having a conversation with you about the Suda that you prepare, the first Shiva meal for when people come home from the cemetery. And I said to you, how long have you been doing this? And your response to me was, about 125 years. And I said, come on, get out of here. And no, you said, no, about 30 some odd years. And I was really astounded that you've held this post so long. I don't think anyone in the community has held a post in the organization for that length of time.
Whenever anyone calls her for a ride, for a doctor, or just wherever they need to go, she's there for them. And also visiting to the hospital where people are just so in need of a friendly face. And she's there for them also. Mazel tov, Lillian. May you have many years of health and happiness. May you go from koach le koach, from strength to strength, and ad 120 shana.
I have been married to Lillian for more than a half a century. I owe her a great debt for whatever she has done for me, and I have never really found a proper way to honor her. Tonight, I say to you, I love you, Lillian, and you see, the whole community showed up to honor you. This cannot be easily matched by any husband. My greatest compliment to you will always be how well you brought up your daughters. They in turn found their way to serve their communities in our traditional way of life. Lillian, nor rain nor snow kept you from your responsibilities, and your commitments started from the day when we moved to West Hempstead some 50 years ago.
Lillian and I we used to do the Shiva meals, and stories that came out of that. There was once we couldn't get into someone's house, so I opened the side window and Lillian pushed me through. The only problem was I was so large that I got stuck in the window, and we couldn't get in, we couldn't get out, but finally I got in, and my mazel, there was a dog that started to leap on me, and I am terrified of animals. So I ran out the front door, and Lillian ran in, and we set up the meal, and then we left.
The shul established all kinds of norms. We felt that we had to be a model for all the communities surrounding us. And so we spoke about chesed, we spoke about kiruv, we spoke about every aspect of bringing people closer to us. But we knew that we could not do this unless we developed a strong base. And that was the philosophy for the very, very beginning of the shul.
When we moved into West Hempstead, we were impressed with the effervescence and the energy of the young people, and of course they had to have goals. They had to know what they wanted to accomplish, and that was something my husband tried to set out for them in his courses and his lectures and his drushes, Shabbos drushes. And I know I was glad that he was very happy there, and it was a good shidduch.
I remember going to my uncle's house. I had an uncle, his name was Murray Katkis, and he lived on President Street, and he was a member of Young Israel of Eastern Parkway. And I would go with him to Rabbi Kanatopsky, and he would always say, you have to listen to this rabbi speak. I don't know what he's saying, but I know it's great. I can't understand it. It's so deep, it's so profound, and his English is impeccable. It's great. People come from all over Crown Heights to listen to him, and I remember listening to him. Didn't understand what he was saying, but I knew it was something very great.
His biggest hobby was to learn Torah. And because of that, he tried to teach Torah and to give it over. At times, his renditions were very deep because he did. He was teaching by the Brisker method. Also, the fact that he was studying himself for a doctorate, he had a lot of new things to give to them.
Highlights were the first half year, 3/4 of a year, was we were involved with the construction of the Erev, which was a wonderful, wonderful community project. It catapulted West Hempstead to world prominence because it got into the newspapers, and I had nothing to do with it getting into the newspapers. All I remember was the day before Erev Pesach, and all the women on the block were they were preparing for Pesach, so they piled about 12 kids into my station wagon, and I took them to City Hall in Hempstead because City Hall was going to go through the process of my renting West Hempstead for $1 in order that we can complete the establishment of the Erev. So there were 12 kids lined up over it. I think it was then Fred Purcell was then not county executive yet, supervisor, I don't know. Anyway, he introduced me and my children to all who were assembled. I don't think they believed that I had 12 children. And I remember when I came home then, my wife tells me, the New York Times called. Anyway, the rest is history. Somebody in the city had notified the New York Times or the press in general that a Jewish rabbi, most rabbis are Jewish, a Jewish rabbi was going to buy the land of West Hempstead from a Catholic mayor so that Jews should be able to carry on Shabbos. This, of course, exploded to the press all over. But the work of doing it together with people, we went out for about a half year every Sunday, walked around West Hempstead, and did a lot of work in order to establish it. Then, of course, I consider the construction of the mikveh as a very significant step forward for the community. And then, in general, there was a certain atmosphere in West Hempstead that I felt very at home with and very comfortable with. There was tremendous amount of Ahavat Eretz Yisrael, a great deal of Ahavat Eretz Yisrael.
I really came straight from yeshiva. I had not had any experience whatsoever. My only experience was watching my father for all of those years. My father's a young Israel rabbi. And I was really wet behind the ears, literally wet behind the ears. And I was frightened as can be. I remember Myron Solka, who was the president at the time, he noticed that when I got up to speak, I couldn't stop my knees from shaking. And I remember the first speech that I gave, it was Parshas Nitzavim, and it lasted about 3 minutes, which was my idea of what a rabbi's sermon should be, 3 minutes. And that afternoon, everybody came. I was in 692 Hempstead Avenue. I had a delegation from the shul, and they come in, they had these dour faces on. I said, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I can't imagine. And they said, Rabbi, a sermon cannot be that short. I said, why not? I said what I needed to say. They said, no, it's got to be, how about try 15 minutes? And Yontif is coming up for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. It's got to be at least 20, 25 minutes. See if you can expand it. Remember, that was my very first Shabbos, my very first experience. But it gave me everything. It taught me industry. It taught me how to work hard. It taught me how to interact with people. And it really taught me one of the most incredible lessons is that the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch come alive. When you're a rabbi of a community like West Hempstead, it becomes real, it becomes palpable. You see the faces. You can put the cases of the Shulchan Aruch and you can actually put them to the faces of people and situations. And that's what I really learned, because West Hempstead was a full community, and the full gamut of experience, of rabbinic experience, of life experience, all of that was included in West Hempstead. And I really had a year just chock full of those experiences. On Hanukkah of that year, Yosef Mendelevich was released from prison after 7 years of total devotion to Hashem and to the Jewish people, total defiance of what was then one of the most powerful regimes in the world. And he came to West Hempstead, and he came to our shul, and it was really majestic. Everybody was there. All of the people of West Hempstead, not only of the young Israel, all of them were there. And he was a little man. And he was so skinny because he was probably starved and had a little beard and had a little hat. And he was like Yosef, who came out of Mibeis HaAsurim. And he got up to speak. And I remember there was not a dry eye to hear a quintessential Jew, a real Jew, a Jew who had sacrificed for his Judaism. And he had come to sing Hashem's praises and the praises of the people of communities like West Hempstead that had secured his release just by their protests and by their caring and by their voices. That was an incredible, incredible evening.
I always think back to West Hempstead and hope that when I advised people, I advised them well. I hope that when I expressed opinions, I expressed them intelligently. I hope that I made a positive impression on young and old alike. I have a feeling that I may have contributed something to the community.
I think that West Hempstead is a wonderful place to bring up children, to raise children. And probably one of the reasons that I feel it is because Rabbi Yehuda Kellemer is the Morad Asra, and the direction that he gives each individual is something that I think is quite unique.
The Shabbos that Rabbi Kellemer came for a praba, Sandy and I hosted him for Shabbos lunch. And after shul, Stephen Shear was standing outside the shul, and he had broken his arm. And Rabbi Kellemer decided to have a conversation with Stephen Shear about the halachot of tefillin. And I remember telling Rabbi Kellemer, come, Rabbi Kellemer, we've got to go there. People waiting for you. He says, give me just a few more minutes. At that point, I saw what type of individual he